part of a bundle called Windows 95 Plus, which, like Netscape, also cost $50. But unlike Netscape, this $50 also gave you extra stuff, like better disk compression technology, special themes, Space Cadet pinball, improved dial-up services, just to name a few things. But despite these extra features, it unfortunately just wasn't enough for Microsoft to get people excited. Also, Internet Explorer was generally slower to making big updates than Netscape was. Netscape's larger market gave better support across multiple platforms, and it took much longer for Internet Explorer to start competing with technologies such as JavaScript. Because of this, Microsoft's web browser just wasn't as good as Netscape. They would slowly start to make things better with incremental updates, but in 1996, things would truly start to change. It was at this time where Microsoft really evaluated its strengths and weaknesses relative to Netscape. If they couldn't compete with the innovation just yet, they could just strike the company's Achilles heel. There was one thing that Microsoft had much more of than Netscape: capital. This means that they could better afford to take a risk that could significantly benefit them long term. Microsoft started to operate hugely on economies of scale. The idea that spending more money now will create a lot more money later on. Netscape got nearly all its money from people buying their web browser for $50. So what did Microsoft do? Well, they released Internet Explorer 3 and made the browser completely free. Heck, they even bundled it with their next update of Windows 95. This is what made Internet Explorer. Microsoft essentially treated the product as a loss leader because they knew the product's exposure to so many machines would increase Microsoft's exposure and strengthen their influence and presence on the internet. Was the browser 100% as good as Netscape? Free is better than paying $50. Ultimately, this plan worked, and this version of Internet Explorer alone brought its market share from around 5% in 1996 to as high as 30% a year later. But there was another thing going on in the tech space that, oddly enough, indirectly helped Internet Explorer's newfound success: the failure of Apple. The 1990s was not a good time for Apple at all. With Steve Jobs no longer in the picture, the company was bleeding money and was even projected to disappear entirely by the year 2000. But when Steve Jobs was hired back in 1997, after the company used most of the money it had left to buy his company next, Apple and Microsoft put together a deal. A very controversial deal, considering the whole Mac versus PC feud was still very much alive, even at this time. Apple was paid $150 million to support a ton of Microsoft Office products, as well as make Internet Explorer the default web browser for Mac OS. This announcement was met with quite the reaction. Although this news generated a lot of mixed opinions in the tech space, it only strengthened the market share of Internet Explorer, because now it wasn't just on Windows, it was even on the Mac. It would also be the default browser on Windows 98, and all these factors contributed to Internet Explorer's convenience, compatibility, and eventually the quality of the product itself. Now that Microsoft was developing a strong hold on the internet, this gave them more time to innovate their product and further solidify its influence. This included creating their own competitor to JavaScript, simply known as JScript, similar extension-supporting technology, even adding communication services and media player support to the browser. In other words, it didn't take long for Internet Explorer to become just as good, if not better, than Netscape. And it was free. By 1999, Internet Explorer had 66% of the browser market share. As you could see, this was not looking good for Netscape, because people now didn't really have a reason to buy it anymore. As terrible as this appears on Microsoft's end, just an optics perspective base, in the year 2000, the company was ordered to split into two sections, one focusing on the development of Windows, and the other focusing on their additional software products. Microsoft then appealed this decision and won. Well, sort of. Instead of splitting the company, Microsoft agreed on a settlement where, from now on, they would basically stop being as hostile towards competing third-party software. But by this time, the damage was already done. By the end of the case, Internet Explorer had around 93% of the web browsing market share, and Netscape Navigator was just old news. They finally started making their browser free, a luxury they initially only reserved for schools and other organizations, but this drastically decreased their revenue, and Internet Explorer's popularity was just too great for it to make the difference. Not to mention that Netscape was also one of the companies most significantly affected by Telephone just earlier that year, which had a drastic impact on the company's monetary value. Netscape would continue to do some incremental updates, but they would eventually disappear in 2003. AOL had been the Netscape company at this point, and they would release a sort of novelty update of the program in 2007, but it garnered pretty much no buzz, and so support for it was discontinued just the following year. So by the early 2000s, let's just say that Microsoft could get comfortable. And that was actually part of the problem. It would be the beginning of the end for Internet Explorer. You could say that Microsoft got a little too comfortable. Because there wasn't really any stiff competition at this time, they no longer felt as much need to innovate. They weren't updating Internet Explorer as frequently or introducing that many exciting features to it, and this would soon catch up with them. And at this time, the internet was rapidly advancing, undergoing big changes, and sites like YouTube were becoming a thing. In other words, the internet now required a lot more power and bandwidth than it did back in the 90s. And Internet Explorer simply wasn't catching up with the times, and that was slowly, over time, affecting its performance. People were tired of settling for mediocrity and started looking to new innovative approaches for web browsing. By 2003, Apple was no longer obligated to make Internet Explorer the default browser for the Mac. So, they created their own browser, Safari, which is reportedly much faster than Internet Explorer. That's because it kept up with the times and used new innovative techniques that allowed the program to run on less RAM and block unnecessary cookies and scripts from slowing down the loading of the page. It also did something called hardware acceleration, which basically let it make the most out of the machine's parts in order to maximize performance. Naturally, Safari was a hit on the Mac users, so other browsers decided to build something similar, and this is when Netscape essentially returns with a fiery vengeance. The source code of Netscape Navigator became open source, which basically allowed for people to legally take the code and do whatever they want with it. One company pretty much just took Netscape Navigator and massively improved it. They made it up to date and run a lot like Safari, but the name Netscape was already associated with the past, so they decided to rebrand it to Mozilla Firefox. Because Firefox is an open source project, they make a lot of their money from voluntary donations and through deals with Google and Yahoo to implement their search engines built into the browser. For this reason, they can provide Firefox for free. Around this same time, Google also uses their capital, much like Microsoft did in the late 90s, to create their own browser called Google Chrome, which followed very similar design to Safari. And this browser was also free to download. And so, the second browser war begins. There was now intimidating competition for Internet Explorer, and worst of all, it was free. Microsoft was now facing their getting a taste of their own medicine. This is why people joke about Internet Explorer being slow, because it quite literally runs very outdated technology. The program would finally lose its majority market share to Google in 2012. But again, the damage was done. Internet Explorer continued to be slow to innovative changes, and their reputation of being a slow browser stayed. They would never gain back their majority hold of the internet. It seems that Microsoft finally came to terms with this, and in 2016, they effectively rebranded Internet Explorer as Microsoft Edge. They built this browser with a system called Chromium, which is, sure enough, what Google Chrome uses. It took them a lot later, but Microsoft finally built a browser that was with the times. However, since E stood for Edge, they still kept the Internet Explorer logo, so people just associated it with that and continued to use it. So Microsoft would eventually change the logo, and around this time, their market share would actually improve. In fact, Microsoft Edge's market share right now is currently the best it's ever been. Now, I couldn't find any data to prove what I'm about to say. This is just a pet theory of mine, but I do believe that this logo change did help influence that growth. Much like how the E had a negative connotation connotation with Internet Explorer, this new circular logo has a positive connotation with all the fast web browsers, particularly Chrome, that have a circular logo. I think that this psychological association allowed people to truly take advantage of this new Chromium-based software and experience just how much faster it really is. And with all the backlash that browsers like Chrome are currently facing, maybe this is the chance for Microsoft to once again get back to the very top. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a third browser war. But until then, if one lesson could be learned from the tale of Microsoft's Internet Explorer, it's that you shouldn't demand too much of what you want all at once, as you might not know what to do with it. But you know what has proven to improve your internet speed? Supporting me on Patreon, of course.
I live in Ohio, and anyone that knows anything about Ohio knows that even the word Ohio is an old Native American word. It means literally land of poor white people. I didn't even know what I was looking at first. I described it. Why are all these white people so sleepy out here? It's really bad. Matter of fact, I was coming out of the nightclub the other night. I parked my car in the alley, and no one was out there. No bodyguards, nothing. I was home up and everything was quiet. And as soon as I opened my car door, all of myself, suddenly, one of these nigga whites, it scared me. I got scared. Then I realized it was a woman who screamed up. So relax, okay? I'm sick, right? I was like, yeah. Two. First gun I bought, 12 gauge shotgun. I didn't want the gun, remember though, I moved to a farm and I was sitting there on the porch and I see a white dude walking across my property. Like he's supposed to be there. He had a rifle over his shoulder too. I was mad as shit. So I was waiting for this one like a bitch. And as soon as he got going, like, I ran to my car and sped the tape. This is in a rural white area. And remember, I was nervous because the guy was on my property. Black. I was sweating, running, and I ran the gun out. Black, sweating, black. And I looked up at the alligator. It looked like a snake or something. I said, I need a gun immediately, like that. Just like that. Guy didn't ask no question, just grabbed his 12 gauge shotgun, handed it to me. I've never even held a gun before. I'm not a dummy, well, I need some bullets too. And the guy reached on the counter, put 2 boxes on the counter. He said, all right, buddy, which box do you want? I didn't know. One box had pictures of some ducks in it. The other box had pictures of deer. I said, well, what's that box with them ducks? So that there's birdshot. And then it goes just like this, not exaggerating. That would kill me. They said, it'll just pepper them up nicely. I said, what the fuck? You know what it means, pepper them up? It means that when the shell explodes, shoot out a barrel of the gun, not kill him, penetrate his skin and shot the flame. So which box do you want? And they picked them on the fear of sugar. I thought he was trying to trick me. I was like, do you have a box of a picture of a white dude trespassing on it? That's exactly the strength I'm looking for. But I don't know that if you're defending your home, the formula dictates that you're supposed to buy a shoe. Yeah. She's right. Right there in the kitchen. It's a paralytic fight. And he's speaking to change, y'all. I don't know. That change.
Hi, and welcome to Trading Spouses, the show where we take two married couples and, you guessed it, make them trade spouses for a whole month. Watch the sparks fly today, because for the first time on our show, we're going interracial.
Daddy's gonna wait for a little while, all right? I'm gonna live with a white family. Y'all be good.
What you gonna be doing with a white family?
It's a TV show. Say hi to America. And if I try to touch your mother, punch him in his... What's up? Mr. Deeds.
These nuts!
T-Mart. Do I call me Daddy?
Is it okay if I call you Mr. Dees?
Mr. Deeds.
These nuts!
I don't understand. What's happening?
You require my services?
That's right.
You call your daddy?
Hell no. Only your mama calls me Daddy. My job. Take my bag up to my room. Now, if I find out you've been going through my shit, I'm gonna beat you in your ass. You understand?
Welcome.
Good to be here. Come on, girl.
Oh, what? Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't smell no dinner cooking. So why don't make some grits? Ronald?
For dinner, mister.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you asked, little buddy. This here is cauliflower, this is corned beef hash, and these are parsnips.
What is a parsnip? So you know, Todd would usually do the dishes after dinner.
Well, just so you know, his ass will be back April 13th. All these things, girl. Knock out. Do your homework. Go upstairs and wash your ass, and then we'll watch Martin Lawrence.
You want me to light your cigarette for you, too?
You better check your tone, girl. Keep your inside voice on before I put your ass outside.
You have my thanks.
Racial profiling.
Who is Renee Zellweger?
What's wrong, sweetie?
T-Mart's been back talking me, and I need you to take care of it for me.
Smart. You're right. You're in big trouble, mister.
Give me a...
You're going on timeout. For 15 minutes, okay? Starting now, T-Mark.
I'm sweet. New 50 cents. I'm from the streets, man. Gee, you.
Oh, in the car. Get your toe into the car. Hey, y'all, my top home, sweet home. The hood? All right, little fella. Say hello to these people for me. And tell them when you see them that Leonard Washington is glad he made it out. Go on. Go on. Goodbye. If you need money, sell rocks. I heard that's what they do around here. Yeah. Damn, bitch was just a lightsaber. Night, night.
Do you want to have sex with me, Todd?
Yes, I would like that very much.
Hit him there, sir! That'll work, mate! Ready to fire!
Right. This time you need to
Fire! Weakest right there, man! Hold down and move up!
Do you want to take off your pajamas?
Actually, I feel more comfortable with just outside, baby. South of the border. One thing Leonard Washington don't do.
But honey, it's okay. I'm waxed.
Hey! I done heard of trimming the hedges. She done scorched the earth.
Crowd on every inch of sail!
Smell your lightsaber.
We ride the wind, for all she's worth!
Lightsaber.
Douse the royals, come!
Leonard and I hardly even talk anymore. The other night, he came home at 3 in the morning. I had no idea where he was. He uses profanity around Jeffrey. I just don't feel like we're sharing. I don't feel like there's any reciprocity there. How do you feel about all this, Leonard?
Bitch, I'll never forgive you for this. Warm it up.
This is good. You can let out whatever you feel here, Leonard.
All right, I'll tell you right now. I ain't crazy. I don't need no psychiatrist. If you ever tell anybody I've been in here, I'll fuck you.
It's just
You ain't confidential. I am crazy. And I'll kill you.
A wild and crazy moment. See what our interracial families have learned.
A lot from Strong. And I learned a lot from Little Seymour. Quite frankly, I found this people very much. First time in my life, I tasted relish. And not my oatmeal. We on this show talk here. No matter where you come from, you know what I'm saying, or what color your skin is, we all pretty much do the same things in life. Raising kids, make love, counter time, and wash. Speaking of which, I learned that white people don't use wash clothes. You know that? Service had one bar of soap in the house. Every time I use it, somebody else's pubic hair was in it. It's like, what you doing? Why you guys gonna put the wrong bar of soap and your button on all this? You got any more for the face and the feet?
Very different. Well, that is the love of my life. In a different world, I could see myself with Todd. Although the penis through the whole thing was kind of weird. And I am missing some of my draws.
Oh,
I can keep.
titty residue.
Yo, Tanisha, it was good seeing you.
Darius heard the comment and had a simple choice to make. Ignore what the man had said and take Tanisha home, or stay at the party and keep it real. When keeping it real goes wrong.
One day, and I keep it real. Sometimes keeping it real can go horribly wrong. You gotta pick your spots. It's good to be real sometimes. It's good to be phony sometimes. Yes, I said it. Phony. Think I'm this nice in real life? That, son. It's 'cause I'm on TV. I'm what? Pull my balls out right now. Skate, 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 skate. If you don't believe me, To keep it real ain't the best thing. And take a look at this.
Vernon Franklin was an exceptional young man. He was the valedictorian of his high
That
school
would have been
class,
funny.
won several scholarships, and became the first person in his family to attend college. He got a good job and worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week, quickly becoming the youngest vice president in the history of the Viacorp Corporation, ending the cycle of violence and drug addiction that had plagued his family for generations. The officers of his company were wrapping up the usual Thursday meeting in the South Conference Room when Frank Murphy, the man who had mentored Vernon, made an awkward comment.
Vernon, great job, buddy. You the man. Give me some skin.
Vernon got along with all of the